Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Sponge Chat. My name is Jim. I'm a teacher, trainer, manager, and blogger, and I'm really happy that you're here. For this Sponge Chat, I was very lucky. I had two people on. Last week, I had the pleasure to speak with Laura Broadbent and Billie Jago from OtterELT. And I had loads of fun in this Sponge Chat. I don't know why it was so fun. I have fun in all of my Sponge Chat, but for this Sponge Chat, it was more fun than usual. Um, we looked at both Laura and Billie's journeys into materials writing. They're both very well established materials writers. And that was quite interesting in itself. But then we looked at the work that they're doing now regarding sort of the digital side of material creation within ELT and how that ties in with OtterELT and why behind teachers and materials writers should get involved. And that was quite interesting. And for those of you that are, meddling around or dipping your feet into the world of materials writing, I think you'll find that quite interesting as well. We did also look at some advice for those teachers that are trying to experiment with materials writing as well. So I think there's going to be a bit of value for everyone. So without further ado, here's the conversation, and I'll see you next time. Good morning, Laura. Good morning, Billie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I want to say thank you very much to both of you for being here with me this morning.
Thank you. It's great to be on the famous Sponge Chats finally. We've made it.
I love how we've got a name now. It's getting out there. Great. Yeah, so thank you very much for being here. Before we get into the Sponge Chat, and we're going to be looking at sort of materials writing and OtterELT, just a brief spiel about Sponge Chats. I mean, these started, I can't remember when they started, 2 years ago, something like that. And the idea was it started looking at teacher training, really, teacher education. And because someone sent me an email, like, how did you move into teacher education? And wanted to show teachers within our industry that there are other avenues, so we can look at teacher training, and then it sort of snowballed to looking at materials writing, editing, all sorts of things. And there were two reasons that I wanted to continue with this, and it was looking at this idea that maybe professionalizing our industry, which at times isn't that professional. And I stand by that statement. And then the other one was to show that there are other career options, and hopefully we can keep teachers within this lovely industry. It can be lovely. And I think what we're going to touch on today is actually quite relevant to that. So I'm looking forward to exploring that with you both. So I always start with a big question in Sponge Chats, and doesn't need to be existential, but it's a question like, who are you both? And so maybe I'll throw it to Laura first. You've just been nominated. Can you give us a spit? Who are you? Who is Laura Broadbent?
Well, I'm a little person. I am from the UK. So yes, I'm a little British person. And I basically actually kind of started becoming a teacher when I was in secondary school, because we used to have to do work experience in secondary schools. And so I went to the primary school nearby and taught the kind of English, when kids in classes sit in mini circles and read out stories and things to each other. So I think it was kind of looking at the storytelling and reading out story skills. Anyway, so that was my first foray into teaching when I was a secondary school student. Anyway, I loved it. And then went on to teach. Well, I studied English, so I've carried on the Englishness, literature and language. So yes, I like my books. Oh, I'm my biggest aim in life is to have my own library. There we go. That's probably the most important thing about
that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Look like you started it behind you already.
This is this is just a small part of it.
Yeah.
And yes, since then, I have taught kind of in Malaysia for a couple of years, in Brazil, and then I was in Spain for nearly 8 years. And then came back to Brighton, which obviously was only meant to be for a year or two, but 7 years later, I am still here. So
Wow.
we'll see. The aim is probably to go back to Spain, but we'll see when that actually happens. And that's kind of it. And yes, I'm sure other bits will come out, but that's the most important.
Definitely. That's Laura in a nutshell, right? Yeah. All right, Billie, it's your turn.
Yeah, so I started teaching. My first teaching job was in Italy, and I sort of did young learners and primary. And ever since then, I sort of made my way through the different ages to sort of, you've got to try to see what you prefer, really. So yeah, similar to Laura, I moved to, actually before that, I moved to China. I was in China for a year teaching sort of large classes of 70, 80 students. Times 20 a week, so there was like over 1,000 students a week, which was quite a good experience for my almost first teaching job. Then I moved to Spain and I was private teaching, sort of started my own business there, and yeah, I've done my CELTA, my Delta, and then I moved back to the UK and I was teaching at a private language school in Cambridge, and I think that's where I became interested in sort of teacher training and things like that. I was running teacher training courses. And then I got the opportunity to write materials. I was writing a photocopyable book with a colleague of mine at the language school at the time, Monica Ruda-Peachy. She's been on your show, actually.
Yes, Monica, and, she's lovely.
Yeah, we worked together for a long time. She was my boss, actually.
Really?
She was my senior teacher, so yeah, she's wonderful. So yeah, we were writing a book together at the time, and then I got an opportunity to write something similar, like a sample for a publisher. So I did that, and then eventually the writing started paying more, unfortunately, than the teaching. So after about a year and a half, I went freelance, and I've been writing materials ever since, and teacher training as well. And then Laura and I crossed paths about 5 years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago. And we knew we wanted to do something together because we just clicked instantly, you know, when you meet someone and you feel like you've known them forever. And our skills fit perfectly together. And yeah, it's been 4 years in the making, sort of deciding what we were going to do. And then last year, obviously, we set up OtterELT, which is we'll go into shortly. But yeah, and I also run a podcast, like a teacher training podcast as well, ELT CPD, and that's me.
That's you. I mean, both of you combined is that's a hell of a lot of experience within ELT, both from a teaching perspective and a materials writing perspective. I mean, you're both published authors. You've both done a lot for the industry, and now we've got OtterELT coming out, which is excellent. I mean, it's working and it's in the mix, which is excellent. Before we get into OtterELT, though, your move into materials writing for both of you, was that just something that you felt like you wanted to do, or did someone say, okay, there's an opportunity to write this, or
great question.
Yeah, like
I think for me, like Laura always wanted to be a teacher, I always wanted to be a writer ever since I was like 4 or 5. And I guess you don't really know when you go into teaching, as you said rightly at the beginning, you don't know where that's going to lead you, because you don't know that there's so many different aspects to ELT. You know, there's not many people that just say I'm a teacher. Everyone wears multiple hats. They wear consultants, teachers, teacher trainers, director of studies, all of these things. So for me, I just knew I wanted to write. And then when I started writing poems and like stuff when I was younger, and then as I say, when I was teaching, I just fell in love with English, which sounds really sad, but obviously this is an ELT chat, and people who are listening will obviously understand that as well, because I think ELT people are passionately ELT people. And then I started like a travel blog while I was traveling around the world teaching, and I'd always been writing. And then obviously when you're teaching, you write your own materials as well. As I say, I got the opportunity to do a sample. But Laura and I often say, like, if you become an editor, you often have like an in-house publishing training, but with writing, there's not really that sort of training. So it is trial and error. Obviously, you write your teaching materials, but to make them published materials, perhaps there's a different way you need to come at it as well. So yeah, I think it's just important to share those materials with other teachers and get feedback on them to then continually improve. But yeah, that's sort of my journey into it. What about you, Laura?
Mine was fluke. I while I was living in Madrid, a friend, she was French, and so she was working in some French cultural job. Anyway, she just had these job alerts coming into her. And one day she said, "Oh, Laura, I've just received this job alert. You might be interested in it." And it was looking for English teachers to become translators. So translating what turned out to be primary school state books from Spanish into English, because it was at that time when Spain was doing a bit of an educational rehaul, and suddenly, almost overnight, a certain percentage of the curriculum had to be taught in English. So one of the big state publishers was scrabbling around to make sure that all of their textbooks were in English. So I went along and started working as a translator, basically, but educational books, although my favorite one was physical education, which were really fun textbooks, which I blew my mind when I was thinking, wait a minute, I'm writing PE books here. I didn't even know they existed. And so
I didn't know until right now.
Yeah.
I remember, writing these sentences like stand up on your toes or stretch down and touch the floor. I can't remember now. Anyway, so I started going to that. So I worked, as a translator for quite a while. And then essentially the publisher ran out of books to translate, and so needed them to be written from scratch. So I started doing that. And then from there, thought, oh, wait a minute, if I can do this with this publisher, maybe I can do it with others. And went around and wrote with others. So as Billie said, it was pure luck and circumstance, because I honestly don't know, even now, I don't really know. I'd never made a conscious decision to do it. I had always loved writing, and as Billie said, kind of the English language and stories. But if you'd said to me, while I was a teacher, you can write these books, and even when you speak to people now, you say, oh, I write the textbooks, and they go, oh, I didn't even think about the fact that someone writes those. It's just so out of, our consciousness. It's never, even when you go to school, it's not part of the careers advice or anything. So it is a bit of you kind of fall into it, don't you? If you're kind of, might be that person that you happen to meet at the right time or whatever. So yeah, fluke. And then I think Billie and I later found our specialisms, but we'll probably go into that with Otter. But it's funny. It's kind of falling into it, isn't it? Rather than thinking, I'm going to become, ELT or educational writer, and see how you do it.
It's really interesting, like, to see like how you both. It seems to be quite common, especially with materials writing, people kind of falling into it or having the chance to do something and then falling in love with materials writing and going from there. I do hope that in the future, at least, people do come into ELT and they think, okay, I'm going to start with teaching, but I do want to move into materials writing in the future, or I do want to move into teacher education, or I do want to move into management or into editing or into all these different, areas or lines of work within ELT.
I think unless I think when probably, because we're all like similar, I guess when we all first started, we didn't really know that was something you could get into. But now with things like sponge chats and all the CPD that is out there, people can see that is a possibility. So they just need to make connections and things like that. And everyone can get into it in a sense, if you've got the talent for writing and if you enjoy doing it, then it's a hope. Because Laura and I always wonder, like, where are the next generation of writers? There's a lot of teachers, obviously, but you have to go through that teaching process to know that you create your own materials and then potentially get paid for them as well. So
and you're right, Billie. And also, how many teachers are there out there? So many. And but you know, when we kind of writing and stuff, it doesn't feel like there are that many writers. So you kind of think, oh, there's so much potential out there. And it's just a case of, because loads of teachers are writing their own materials anyway.
Yes.
And so, it's not a giant leap to, then whether, you do it all the time or you do it a bit on the side as well as teaching. It's completely, also the good thing is, because obviously with writing you can sit down and kind of do it anywhere. It really works well with teaching, because I know, Billie, you did it when I met Billie, she was writing and teaching. How did you find the juggling both?
Oof, awful. I was so stressed for so long. I think it was well over a year, I think my first writing job, I was looking, when you like clear out your emails, I was looking through my emails the other day, and I remember seeing the first email about this photocopiable's job. And I think it was about a year and a half after that. And I used to drive like an hour to the language school that I was working at, and an hour home. And my hours were like 8:30 till 6:30. So I used to write afterwards, or sometimes I'd like treat myself and get the train and write on the train. But yeah, it's just it's hard, and there's probably a lot of teachers going through it. And there comes that point where you think, do I leave? Is that a risk? And it is a risk, and I guess you have to have that in your personality to want to take that risk. But ultimately, if it financially is better for you, then you have to do that.
It's an option.
Yeah, definitely. But definitely keep your foot in the classroom, of course.
Yeah. Well, in fact, perhaps we can talk about freelancing after, like some of the nuances, if you will, of freelancing after. But speaking about this idea of connection and connecting, let's shift our focus to OtterELT. What is OtterELT? Who wants to give us a spiel for OtterELT?
A really good one at this.
All right, let's go for it, Billie.
So, as I say, Laura and I came together quite a while ago, but we knew we wanted to work together. As you said, like our skills sort of really fit together. Laura did focus on like primary young learners, a lot of special educational needs, and I just love assessment, and I've done a lot of sort of like adult materials as well. So whatever she likes, I'm not really keen on, and whatever I like, she's not really keen on. But with both of those skills, we sort of were focusing on digital, and we could have cloned ourselves multiple times for the amount of sort of digital work that was coming our way. So we thought, well, there are a lot of packages. We don't like the word packager, but a lot of packages are out there, which is essentially sort of packaging the publishing process. So you project manage, you provide writers, you provide editors to a publisher or an educational institution, private language school, whatever it may be. And you essentially manage the whole project for them. This is something that can't really be avoided. It's happening in ELT. It's a change that has been coming for a while, but there isn't really a digital first packager out there. So we decided to put our skills together, start the agency, and it's gone from there, really. We do a lot of editorial work, project management, digitization of products, and we've recently got into sort of app developing and things like that. So yeah, we have a database of freelancers, writers, editors, project managers, and we have a team of developers as well. And yeah, we provide that to people that need it in the publishing industry.
I think also, just to add to that, recently we've kind of been moving also, or adding kind of research as well. So pre-product research. So whether it's market research and things like that. So it's quite a big range. So I suppose everything that exists in hard copy exists in digital, plus more with the software and development as well.
I think like what makes us different is the fact that we do hire new writers as well. We've come from a place where we know unless you have those connections, it's very hard to get into writing. So we go through quite a rigorous like application process. We have samples from writers and editors, and we check that and we give feedback where necessary. And obviously we can look at those skills and see what they might be best applied to, because digital is such a huge, broad term. So it might be someone might be good at writing video scripts, or might have experience on Avalane or a certain digital platform. Someone else might be better at apps. Someone else might be good at, let's say, a voiceover, for example. You know, whatever falls within that digital sphere, everybody's got different talents, and it's important that we're sort of honing those skills, not just in experienced writers, but also in those new writers who just need those opportunities as well.
Excellent. So, I mean, the clients or the companies or organizations that you work with are, you know, they're big names. Like you're working with from your website, like with Cambridge, with Pearson, with a lot of the big publishers. And would it be correct to say that you are kind of the middle women in the process? Is that how, would that be a good summary of it?
Yeah, absolutely. But as Laura said, sometimes it's pre-project as well. So we might someone might come to us with a proposal of an idea of something that they want, might be their first foray into digital. They might be thinking, we've got this product, we don't really know what to do with it. We don't just want to have a book online, essentially. So we can also do sort of the research and pre-product stuff before we get the freelancers involved. But then, yeah, essentially we are in the middle, but not in a negative way, because I think that has a negative connotation in a way.
Phrase out, the middle person comes to
yeah, no one likes the middle person, do they? So yeah, we're sort of there just to make it easier, you know. Essentially, like, in-house teams are shrinking. When I first worked with a specific publisher, the team was like 30 plus. Now there's 6 of them, right? And there's no in-house editors, no writers, things like that. So those 6 people have to manage such a huge project. Imagine there's a student's book with 8 levels, 8 units to each level. You're doing the digital components, workbooks, teachers' books. And so, like, you just need someone to help you manage that. And that's essentially what we're there for. Just to make publishers' lives easier, but also to help the freelancers. You know, there's a lot of people that need work, because if you are quite a big name, you tend to continue getting work. But if you're not that well established, how do you become that, you know? So yeah, we're on the side of both the freelancer and the publisher. Definitely.
That's brilliant. Does it seem well, first of all, and I've got a question that we'll come back to in a second about freelancing, but specific with setting up this with OtterELT and setting up this process. Obviously, you both worked in materials writing for a period of time before this, and so I imagine there were connections established and so on and so forth. But were there any major problems that you came up against when trying to set up OtterELT and get it working? Maybe to Laura, or
I wouldn't say there were problems, because Laura and I have very open communication. Like, it's unusual to just meet someone and just, like I said, just click with them. But Laura and I immediately just clicked, and for some reason, like, we're super duper open. Do you know what I mean? Even though we've only met face to face maybe 5 or 6 times. So yeah, I think it was more of a learning process, to be honest. We learned a lot about ourselves, or we have learned a lot about ourselves in the last few months, just in terms of skills that we didn't know that we had until we had each other, you know. Like, I might think I'm confident in one thing as a freelancer or teacher or trainer or something, and then when we come together, I realize actually that's Laura's skill, you know. So it's just finding out what we're best at, and obviously developing processes for when there are multiple things going on at once as well. You need many hands to juggle. So it's good that there's 2 of us. Laura, what do you think?
Yeah, I think kind of, you know, just extending or what Billie said, I think communication is generally the key to life, isn't it? And so, because Billie and I think it's quite a transition from being a freelancer, working on your own, having the very occasional meeting with your editor, and essentially being left to it. And then the transition from that to working with each other. So, you know, we kind of depend on each other, we rely on each other, and we still rely on ourselves. And you know that what you do directly affects the other person. And then we are, you know, we're in meetings almost every day, talking to lots of different people, and we're doing, you know, quite different type of work. And all of this, you know, it's a big shift. And so being able to navigate that together comes down to our communication. And, you know, if I'm not, there was a moment where I wasn't feeling great about something. I didn't even have to say anything. A few days later, Billie said to me, oh, by the way, I think you're feeling like this. She kind of articulated it better than I even thought it. And then, we sorted it out and it's resolved. And I think the ability to reassess continually together allows, exactly as Billie said, it changes it from being a challenge or a problem to just being a learning curve. And I think that's probably, nothing is a problem if you can work together to solve it. It's just, it's actually just teaching you how to go around and over things together, which surely, is a great thing, even for our own things. And I do find, I think Billie and I say often, before, again, you're working on your own. But now, sometimes if one of us goes into a meeting on our own, it's quite a strange feeling because we're having to kind of be business based, we're talking to big stakeholders, and you have to suddenly change your mindset from little me who sits in a corner and just, writes books or whatever, to suddenly being at the forefront. It's terrifying. And it makes, and I think we regularly tell each other how important the other is to us and to Otter. Just so it's a continual growth in every sphere.
That's amazing. Sounds like you've got quite a really nice synergy there between you both, and an excellent team environment.
Just gonna throw love heart at the screen.
Love heart. Yeah, there we go.
We have a new one as well.
I was when you were speaking, Laura, I was like, there are so many quotable moments in this. I love those. That's amazing. That was great.
Soundbite for the episode for sure.
That's amazing. There was so much love there. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's real.
So, obviously there are perhaps three major elements in Otter. Obviously, you're looking at dealing with the publishers and the larger stakeholders. You have both of you that are managing this process and in the meetings, but then also you have the freelancers that you work with. You mentioned that there's a database there. For those that are looking to move into materials writing or are already established, how would they get involved with Otter, and why would they do so? In terms of, do they come to you with a specific idea in mind, or do they come to you with a profile of what they've done and what they're interested in? What's the sort of the process or things that they need to consider before approaching you?
I'd say initially, you don't really need to consider anything. If you want to join.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't overthink it. Come on board.
There's only advantages for freelancers, essentially.
Yes.
Brilliant.
There's nothing to lose, really.
Yeah.
If you go on to our website, which is OtterELT.com, there's just a link to fill in the application form. And it's short, it's not onerous at all, and then we send out a sample, whether you're editor or writer, slightly different samples. Do the sample, send it over, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're in.
Yeah. Yeah, the sample is super short. It's not like laborious, sometimes you get those samples and you think, oh my gosh, I have to do a whole reading test or something.
Yeah,
it's literally it's 30 to 40 minutes. It's essentially just digitizing some print material and just thinking about it as a digital product. But obviously we give applicants like free rein to do what they want with it. There's not too many restrictions. It's just to see how people understand the differences between digital and hard copy materials, essentially. But yeah, there's also our LinkedIn page and our Instagram page, and we always post our application form on there as well. And then there's just a link to upload the CV so we can see any digital experience in the past as well.
And I think, there's a part where we ask your history, but there's also a part, what do you want to do, what are you interested in doing, because obviously that's generally what drives someone to be good at what they do. And I think that's a really key thing for us, and part of the sample is you may think you're good at X because you've done X in the past, but we can see that also you'd be very good at Y, and you just don't know that because you haven't had the experience yet. So I think, you know, joining us is you know, great opportunity to find out and have a go at other things that you might not have been able to before. Or, you know, if you're a new writer, we'll help you. You will for sure have skills that are very, very valuable. And I think a lot of people, because, you know, writing is quite a lonely profession, and as a teacher we don't often go and watch our peers. You don't realize how good you might be at something. You might just think it's normal, and actually it isn't. So, you know, we're there to say, actually, you're really, really good at this. Did you know that? And, you know, would you like to do it for us? So, yeah, and the sample is 30-40 minutes, and that's all the expenditure there is for you.
Exactly. And I think because you asked sort of why as well, I think it's just important to have as many avenues to obtaining work as possible as a freelancer. Of course, it can come through word of mouth, but there are a lot of packages, you know, and so yeah, I mean, signing up to us is a good thing, because we come from a freelancing background ourselves, so we wouldn't put anyone in a position that we wouldn't put ourselves in, you know. We pay fairly, our deadlines are fair, you know, we have I think we pride ourselves on communication as well, because obviously, as you mentioned, the middle person, there is inevitably going to be communication lags when you're communicating a message from one person to another and it's going through you. But yeah, we keep our freelancers updated all the time with everything, and we're quite open with that as well. So yeah, I think come and try.
Yeah.
Also remembering it's not exclusive, as in, you know, you could be a member of a gazillion packages.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter. So, you know, we don't mind if you're a member of other packages, because we always have been.
And,
you know, that's the way it works. So, you know, you can join us and join loads of others as well.
So basically, give it a shot. What do you got to lose, right?
Nothing to lose.
Why not?
To gain.
Yeah. Well, I have a few follow-up questions. First of all, the first one that come to mind when obviously talking today and looking at the website and things like that, you're focused pretty much on digital. For those of us that are new to this, what is the difference then between working with digital materials or creating digital materials and print, apart from the obvious element that one is digital and one is in print?
So I think one of the big things that you'll see a lot, particularly with digitization, because that's essentially an adaptation, but is you need to have a pedagogical understanding of the way students learn in, you know, digital environments. So, for example, if you're sitting, well, imagine if you're in one of Billie's classes in China, where there were how many students in the class, Billie? 70, did you say?
Yeah, 70, yeah.
Imagine there's 70 people all in one room, which I can't even imagine. I don't think I've ever seen that in a classroom. And, you know, imagine the vibe going on. It's going to be, you know, raucous, or maybe not. You know, you're talking around, you know, you're turning around, you're talking to people, you're sitting in different positions with each other. You're obviously interacting with other people in the classroom. You've got the acoustics of the classroom. You've got where you've been before, where you're going afterwards. All of these things have a huge impact on the way you're learning and the style of learning. And let's say you're sitting, as all of us are now, on our own in a room. That's a completely different learning experience. So the materials have to be completely different in order for someone to be motivated, to be supported, to be guided clearly, and to feel like they are making progress. Because there is not someone standing in front of them saying, oh, don't worry, if you don't understand it, I'll sit down with you and we'll go through it another way. That's not there. So the kind of the mindset behind is understanding that, and therefore providing all of the things a student needs, and remembering, you know, students will be learning in digital environments for a huge range of reasons. So also understanding that as well. So I see it as a great puzzle or great jigsaw. You know, how can you provide everything, you know, all together in one, you know, digital, you know, whether it's an app, whether it's a platform, or, you know, whether it's going to be taught, you know, in groups, or is it hybrid? All of that is such a great puzzle. It's really, really fun.
And when
Yeah,
it comes to the content itself, like imagine looking at a beautifully designed textbook, you know, you don't have that on someone might be learning on their phone, for example, right? So you've got an image. Does it work with text? Can you do a reading task on there? You know, you have to think about how you can condense that, word limits, character limits, especially practicing assessments. Like that's really, really tricky because you can't do like a full practice paper on your phone. You would have to divide it in some way. Video tasks as well, you need that video, but you also need the question that you're trying to answer. It's just like Laura said, putting the pieces of the puzzle together and thinking about different ways that people might be learning, whether it's a phone, an iPad, a screen, a desktop. You know, it's really challenging. It's to go from thinking about, oh, here's the print book, it's not simply lifting it off the page at all. So yeah, I think that's why we sort of do send out a sample, because the digital pedagogy is very important, just knowing the limitations and having like guidance, like Laura said, you know, having a teacher voice there to tell that person what they're doing if it is an autonomous learning platform as well.
I mean, that sounds really, really interesting. And some stark differences then from looking at sort of the print and the digital. You mentioned that once freelancers are in, once they're in with Otter, you mentioned that you provide guidance or some help, if you will, to those. Is that in the form of like an established development program, or is it just working with them in the creation of materials, providing feedback? How does that work?
Mm-hmm. So do you want to go, Billie? I don't
know. No, you go. Sorry, you look like you were ready to go.
I think do you know, it's funny, we were talking about this just for Christmas, so we don't currently offer an official training program. However, we were talking about that because, you know, as we've all mentioned, there are few and far of those available. But what we do is, first of all, obviously we choose the freelancer based on what we know about them so far, what they've done, what they want to do. And then we'll have obviously they'll receive the brief, and we'll have a meeting or meetings, as many as they need, with them to go through again the background of it, to kind of, you know, sink them into the correct mindset to, you know, be using whatever it is. And so, you know, giving them support and guidance verbally, and obviously answering all of their questions. When they, you know, generally when they are doing work, if it's a big piece of work, you know, they submit a little bit first, give them feedback, go through it, see what they're happy with, you know, see how it could be, you know, improved, changed, or continue as they're going. And then, you know, they carry on, and always being available, one of us, for questions. Questions are great. You know, I know particularly when I was a freelancer, I used to be kind of scared of asking questions, or if I'd sent one email asking questions and then I had another question and I thought, oh no, I can't send another email. But, you know, now I'm more than happily do that, because I know that receiving them is great. And so the constant communication, it's essentially like being in a classroom, being taught whatever. It's kind of the same interaction, really.
Exactly. And then that in turn, on larger projects, freelancers having communication with each other. I've seen a lot of discussion recently about that being an issue when you're working for a packager or an agency, and the freelancers somehow aren't supposed to know who each other are, even though you're in the same boat. So like, we don't have an issue with freelancers knowing who each other is, who the client is, most importantly, who are they creating these materials for? It's not a secret, you know. And yeah, there's a lot of and I think with the last few years through the pandemic, a lot of teachers and writers have developed their digital skills and their digital writing skills. So a lot of people are coming through with Avalane author experience, for example, Lonosity, which is another authoring platform. There's a lot of the majority, I would say, I think you might agree, Laura, are coming through with this experience already. Obviously, if we have a large scale project that requires, let's say, a ridiculous number, 5,000 Avalane experienced people, then that's when we would have to consider obviously providing a training on that, because we're experiencing that ourselves. But at the moment, a lot of people have developed those skills. There's an Avalane training course through Publishing Professionals as well. There's a discount, I think. And a lot of people are just doing this off their own backs too. So yeah, I would say the majority of people at the moment that are applying do have some digital experience, whether that's as a teacher or published materials writer.
And for those
Brilliant.
for anyone who's worried about if they don't have it, first of all, don't worry, because you can learn. But there are also quite a lot of courses out there that are kind of rated, well, that are free or not, they're not expensive at all. And so, if you want to do it, it's, I think there are quite a few courses that you can find. Don't really take up a lot of time. You can do from home if you want to, but also don't be afraid to apply if you don't have any of that experience, because you will still be valuable.
Brilliant. An interesting point that you mentioned before, I think it was Billie, you mentioned that the in-house publishing teams were quite big before.
Yeah.
And now they've shrunk. Is this a general trend in materials writing where the publishing houses have become smaller and the freelancing is the way to go now? Is that the general trend? I don't know who to address this.
Yeah,
100%,
I can't think of any publishers that have in-house writers. Can you, Laura? I know there are some with still with in-house editors. I think Cambridge do still have in-house editors. I think National Geographic Learning still have them. Of course, there's others. These are just ones off the top of my head, but there's definitely, as far as I'm aware, no in-house writing team anymore. And I think many moons ago, publishing's changed a lot. Like, you used to maybe get a royalty for your product, but now it's digital. How can you get a royalty? Because it's one of those things that's out there. Okay, it needs continually updating, but it's not like releasing a new edition of a book, for example. So yeah, I think publishing's changed a lot. Even in the 5-6 years that I've been in it, teams have shrunk, and that happens multiple times a year. So those contacts and connections you've built aren't there anymore a lot of the time. So it's also a refresh for you as a freelancer, often having to build those new connections too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I've had exactly the same experience as Billie.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever met an in-house writer.
No, I've never heard of it. It probably was.
I was talking more about the editing team and
they are still a lot smaller. A lot smaller.
Yeah. I think many publishers that I started my career with, the one that I did the sample with, that whole team is basically gone now, and there's just like one person remaining, I think.
Wow.
Sorry, Laura.
No, I was just saying everything is outsourced now. I think that might be the case a lot across lots of things in society. Healthcare comes to mind right now. So much is outsourced. And that's why it's important, I think, not to consider. By the way, when we say packages, I don't know, some people might not know what a packager is. An agency might be a more, a term that, if you don't know what a packager is, essentially an agency. It's a lot of the time, I think, agencies or packages are vital to getting work, because how else do you do it? There are one or two people in the house. The chances of you getting to know them are tiny. And so it's kind of the way things are now being done. Do you think? Really? I think
100%. A first-hand experience. There was a job a while ago on a website advertised for freelancers, and I was freelancing at the time still, and I applied, and then the job had gone, and then I was approached by a packager to do the same job. And so I thought, oh, well, I didn't get it as a freelancer because the packager got the job, because it was much easier for that packager to hire. I think there's 20 writers on the team at the time. Hire those 20 writers than it would be to go through the 20 applications, which some people might say, unfortunately, but actually it's so much easier for everyone involved, because the communication is going to be, the agency is on your side, as a freelancer, but also on the team of the publisher, as I said, and it's just easier for them to manage. Thinking about what you said about the editorial process being outsourced, I think that goes for everything: design, audio, all of these things are done out of house now. We've made a lot of connections with audio teams and design companies and app developers. You know, this all used to be in-house, but I don't just think it's the editorial side of things. I think it's the whole product essentially, and there's someone who oversees that, or a few people that oversee that, market it, sell it as well. Yeah,
that's really interesting. And yeah, it makes sense then to be part of, as you call it, a packager or an agency, because as like making those connections can be really difficult, if not impossible sometimes, especially during the pandemic when there were no conferences. Really, it was just, you know, online stuff. And yeah, while online conferences, yeah, they were nice. You miss the feeling of the, hey, Laura, lovely to see you, you know. But
what about you?
yeah.
Do you write as well, or do you just mainly teach?
Me,
Yeah.
I do write some materials, but they're task-based materials and things that I'm experimenting with, and teacher training materials. So in terms of actually writing course books and stuff, that's not something that I've really been that interested in. For me personally, task-based materials, yes, because task-based language teaching is something that I love and I'm a big advocate of. And obviously teacher education materials is more my line of work, if you will. But in saying that, I do encourage, well, as a teacher, as you mentioned, Billie, you're always creating your own materials, adapting things and stuff like that. But I'm always encouraging my teachers on my teaching team to say, you know, if you're interested in this, then there are many avenues to have a look at, you know. So and some are quite interested, you know. So I've worked with some teachers before, and yeah, they've been creating good materials and say, okay, have a look at this. And whether it's the Morsig or some of the other, you know, places where people can get in touch out there, that they've taken a look, and you know, it's been good to see them interested in taking it further.
That's so important. Yeah, it's really good. So just having that support from above, you know, I don't think I ever really received that as a teacher, not from like senior teachers and stuff, but higher than that. You know, I remember when I first said I was going into materials writing, and there was like a shock reaction from my boss at the time, like, that will never work, you can't sustain a career doing that. And I was just like, oh my gosh, maybe I can't do this. But yeah, I wish I was part of your team, because it sounds like you really support them and lift them up and guide them in different ways as well.
But I think this is also, and I don't want to say this if there are managers that are good managers that have said that, but I also think that this is where this idea of professionalism within our industry, there is a lot of the support that needs to be provided to teachers in terms of mentoring and understanding the opportunities that are available to them are not provided in many places. And if there are any teachers out there that are in this situation, I'd say to either speak to your managers and say, you know, are these options available to me in my context, whether it's, you know, moving into teacher training or writing materials for the place that you work. And managers need to really consider, you know, how they're mentoring their teachers and the opportunities that they're providing to them. Anyway, that's my little rant.
No, it's crucial. It's crucial. Luckily, I did receive some support from my language school in Cambridge, and they said I could lead a teacher training course, you know, and if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't have created the materials for the teacher training course and continued doing teacher training, you know. So it is really important for language schools to provide that, or just make people aware, like you said, Morsig, the materials writing interest group, you know, just knowing about these things, and then you have the option to join them or not. Like you said, not everyone wants to write a textbook. People might love teacher training, other people might love something else related to ELT. It's just having that opportunity to try those different hats, you know.
Yeah, definitely. So if we're looking at materials writing in general, both digital and print, which I know that both of you have experience with both. What pieces of advice would you give to teachers looking to move into materials writing or experiment with? Would there be one or two pieces of advice from each of you that you'd give?
Over to Laura.
Oh my gosh.
I would say teachers getting into materials writing, I would say make connections 100%. And we've said that, and it sounds a bit cliche, but
if they said to you how, then what would you say?
Sorry, say that again.
If then they responded to you and they said how LinkedIn, like I said earlier, like I feel like I know James in the sponge chats because I've seen you all over LinkedIn, you know, or there's other people out there who I know who have just posted all the time on LinkedIn, whether that's blogs, whether that's their own teacher made materials, and they've got hired by publishers through that. I would say LinkedIn is the #1 resource. Obviously, there's also things like the materials writing special interest group through OtterELT. There's lots of special interest groups, inclusivity, special educational needs, teacher training, whatever your sort of specialism is, definitely join one of those in OtterELT. Go to the conferences, put your name badge on and awkwardly network with people as much as you can. There's the ELT Freelancers Away Day. I think even as a teacher, like go to these conferences. I did, as Laura said, that's where we first met. I was a teacher and I went to the conference and I had my notebook and I was going up to everyone like, how can I become a writer? You know, and just absorbing that information from everybody like a sponge.
Yes.
And LinkedIn. I'd say Instagram is also quite up and coming with like ELT. It's not up and coming, but in ELT it seems to be. There's a lot more going on there as well. So yeah, conferences, CPD, and just absorbing information from as many people as you can. And don't be afraid to reach out to people. You know, if you want to chat to someone and ask them a question, just go for it. You know, what's the worst that can happen? They don't reply. So
excellent.
Yeah, I think if you're on LinkedIn, look for commissioning editors. They're the people because obviously you go onto LinkedIn and you go, great, I'm here. What do I do now? So yeah, search for commissioning editors, and then obviously, you know, as LinkedIn does, it'll suggest a gazillion other mutual contacts or, you know, whatever. And that's where you start, you know, it's a bit like Spotify, isn't it? When you get music and then it's just more and then albums, etc. So it works in exactly the same way. So start with those people. And as Billie, you know, I used to despise networking. I used to despise conferences. It really, you know, I dread it. I'd shrink into a tiny little hard acorn inside at the thought of it. It wasn't a natural experience for me at all. And I think what I found useful is, okay, so when I went into the classroom, you know, you can say you're yourself as a teacher, but you're not. You are acting, because who stands in front of a group of 30 people and talks at them in a normal social situation? No one does. So it's, you know, that for me it was the same mindset that I used to go into my classroom. I put that mindset or that mask on again to go into the conferences, and then with time you realize that you don't have to do that because it does become more natural. But if, you know, at the beginning you feel like that, one, I totally understand you, and two, you can get through it. But yeah, just act, just become, imagine who you want to be, have fun with it. Be like, oh, today or at this conference I'm going to be this, and this is my favorite hobby. Make it up, it's more fun. And then, you know, go in there. Obviously don't lie about things, but, you know, I might tell you that my favorite fruit is a kiwi when it isn't, just for fun. You know, try and inject that bit of, you know, fun into it, and also see it as not as a, I'm going in there because I'm only going in there to get something from other people. You will also have things to give. So seeing it is much more of a sharing opportunity rather than a leeching opportunity. Might make you feel more comfortable about doing it as well.
And that's
100%.
exactly what you said earlier as well about the materials. You know, you might not know that you're a superstar writer because you've never shared it or not had the confidence to share it. It's the same with networking. You know, you've got ideas and teaching tips that someone else might not even have thought of. And I think it's also important, like I remember with the last ELT freelancers, there was a lot of talk about it was like, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, is there a room you can go to? So I think if you don't feel comfortable doing the social thing face to face, it's perfect to be online doing it, because you can sort of not hide behind the screen, but you know what I mean? Like, it's different networking on the screen. And there's things like Teresa Bestwick's group, the TEFL Development Hub on Facebook. They have weekly coffee chats or monthly coffee chats as well. Just pop into one of those. If you don't feel comfortable, switch off your camera and slowly leave. But yeah, there's definitely ways to do it for everybody, especially if you're more of an introverted person or just don't feel comfortable in those situations as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. It's a common theme with a lot of the materials writers and editors that I've spoken with seems to be this, or two things. One is networking, or at least making yourself known to people. And another one seems to be getting things that you're making out there. So whether it's through blogs, like Silvina, she has some amazing stuff out there, or sharing, or doing conference talks and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd say that's really, really important to do. Perhaps if we're on the advice section, is there something that you would say about the realities of being a freelancer?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so obviously you're well established, and a lot of the people that I've spoken to, they're quite well established, but a few of them have just been starting out, and they've mentioned that there are some things to consider before going freelance as a materials writer. And here we're talking about the realities of finding work and things like that. Are there any points that you would mention there?
Yeah, I think you need to think that the worry never goes away, whether it's 3 years, 20 years, 1 year. You're always going to be thinking, oh my gosh, in May I don't have any work, and it's January. And so as a teacher, you've got set hours, you've got set classes and set students, and they're there for a set. Yeah, and holidays, exactly. You've got potentially holiday pay, things like, well, potentially not in ELT, but things like that. So yeah, the worry never goes away, which is why it's important to have someone to vent to, rant to, and also just listen to you.
Yeah.
Have a sounding board. Laura is my sounding board. And just someone else who is in that situation, because you're not alone. And I think it's one of those things that no one likes to talk about, because there's a fear that no one else is feeling the way that you are, but it's always going to be there, whether that's worried about financially not having work, or whether that's just about time-wise not having work. There's so many different factors, but
yeah,
ultimately I think the crux of leaving teaching to become a freelance, I hate to say it, but it does come down to finances. Because if you just have 1 month's salary left of your teaching, and then you're like, right, I'm just going to go freelance, and you haven't made those connections, you haven't got a base of savings, then ultimately it probably won't be a success. So you do need to think financially, can I last for 6 months? I would say 6 to 8 months on this, if I didn't get any work at all. You always need to think worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Laura, what do you think?
I think yes, and remembering the beginning will be a case of doing both.
Yes, yeah.
Put off by Billie saying how horrific it was. I mean, remembering the beginning of anything, I think that they say it takes at least 2 years to get any new business established and up and running. And so what I think is useful, one, kind of write down, or in any way you think and you note things down, is what's important to you. Why are you doing this anyway? As Billie said, is it because you want more money? Is it because you want complete autonomy? Is it because you want to be able to work remotely? Or loads of other reasons. Write that down. Then write down what's important to you. Is it important that you can work when you want? Is it important to you that you don't have a boss? Is it important that you are essentially, in charge of yourself? Or is it something else? Write that down as well, because you are going to forget that quite quickly, because there will be so many things coming at you and feelings that you didn't expect, that it can become overwhelming at times, and it will, and that's normal. And remembering that that's also temporary, and then also so go back to that, and remembering that it takes time to get the balance that suits you. It takes time. It won't happen straight away, and don't beat yourself up about not getting it straight away. It took me about 6 years. And then I still, Billie knows this very well. There would be many times I'd be working 14, 16 hours a day. I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I would sit all day and write, which is very unhealthy. And, it's a tricky thing because projects, unfortunately, there isn't a huge pool of projects that you just pick and choose which ones suit you. They come when they come. And, as a freelancer, particularly at the beginning, you're going to say yes to everything.
Yeah.
But just remembering that's temporary, but always go back to what's important to you and why you're doing it. And that will help you at least make decisions that make you happier in the long run rather than struggling.
Mm-hmm. And also don't assume that you have to work for one of the big publishers. There are private language schools that you can write materials for. You can start your own blog, you can go on Teachers Pay Teachers. There's a lot of ways to get into paid materials writing without having to work for the big publishers.
Mm-hmm.
Joining an agency like OtterELT, for example.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, sorry, I was just super quickly. If you will often get more free reign if you are not working for one of the big publishers.
Yeah.
Which might be very nice. Just think about, it's not always about prestige or status, if that even comes into it, but it's about you enjoying the work that you're actually creating.
Exactly. There's so many small edtech firms out there now that are just looking for content. They're just starting up, they're just creating platforms. And there's loads on TEFL.com. There's writing jobs, LinkedIn, again, pushing LinkedIn, but there's so many different writing jobs on there. And especially digital, I think for someone who is just getting into materials, digital first is probably the best way to go now, because that's when the majority of the work is at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. I really like how you're both quite so honest about that. There's this idea that moving into materials writing is all peachy and lovely and things like that, but it can be a struggle. From everyone that I've spoken to, there are, especially at the start of your materials writing career, as you mentioned, Billie, you're teaching and writing at the same time, and there needs to be that level of financial stability and savings and these things considered. So yeah, for those listening, if you want to move into material writing, great, but just consider these things as well. The last section of Sponge Chat, there's always book recommendations. I love this. I love books, and I know, Laura, you love books as well, so I'm expecting some good recommendations. Do you have any book recommendations for those thinking about materials writing, or maybe they're already materials writers and maybe there's a book that they should be looking at? I'll hand it over to you both. Who would like to go first?
So I'll say, first of all, I think every single book in the ELT Teacher to Writer series,
yes,
all of them, I'm sure all of us have got a copy somewhere on our bookshelves. The compendium's really good because you get sort of a lot into one. I think it's all the skills series as well. Writing the skills series is really a really good book. And obviously Inclusive Materials, which came out last year. It depends what avenue you want to go down. If you want to focus on video scripts, there's a book for that. If you want to focus on digital materials, hopefully there will be a book for that. If you want to focus on many different aspects have been covered in those books. So that would be my number one place to go, first of all.
Mm-hmm. The ones that are coming to my mind, and is it ELTpedia, the series?
ETpedia, yeah.
The super colourful ones. Apart from the fact they've got the best front covers. I think that they're essentially, I say, between 50 and 100 activities. It could be business English, it could be special educational needs, it could be, again, it's a wide range, but there are so many activities in it that give you ideas, because it shows you how it's structured. Each one is structured, it gives you ideas, and you can adapt loads of them. It's kind of a springboard. I think the ideal is to read one of the Teachers to Writers, which gives you the theory and how to, then the what was it? Pedia? ELET?
ETpedia.
Why do I want to add another letter? Wikipedia, which shows examples of, you know, what the teachers to writers are doing, and then the next step is yours. So it's kind of stepping stones, and because both of those series have lots of editions for different, you know, purposes. So I would say that's one of mine. I mean, most of mine are really special educational needs directed, because that's what I love doing. So that they, you know, lots of my recommendations might not be that relevant for lots of people. But at least the ET-pedia is, you know, kind of all-encompassing as well.
To add to that, there's another resource that I used a lot in my materials writing, because obviously there's quite a focus on mediation in the classroom at the moment. So Ethan and Ricardo's book through Delta Publishing, Activities for Mediation. Have you got it on the bookshelf?
I mean, I've interviewed both of them. We will innovate with them and stuff like that. This is an absolutely amazing book. Yeah,
they're wonderful.
I would say that is a series, that Ideas Action by Delta Publishing, because they also have another one by Anne Margaret Smith, which is
I don't have that one.
And James has loads of them.
Yeah, I mean, I've reviewed quite a few of them. I've reviewed.
What's your opinion of them?
Oh, I actually have to tell teachers not to take them because they take them home. I've never ever come across a resource book that every single one of my teachers they want, and these books I can't keep them in here. Like I have a rule now that they can't leave the academy. But for example, this one here is one of my favorites as well, from Anderson McCutcheon. They're absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Amazing. I agree. I'd go as far to say they are some of my favorites. Well mentioned, Billie. So yeah, what is it? Delta Publishing Ideas Action series.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because they're sort of creating materials that are relevant as well. You know, like mediation. I had to write a mediation project, and I was sort of thrown in at the deep end. So I had a chat with Ethan and Ricardo just to get clarity on that as well. I'm also gonna shamelessly plug a book that I wrote with Monica. I'm not sure whether she mentioned it. It's the one that we wrote many moons ago. It's called Work It Out with Phrasal Verbs. And the reason that we wrote it was because we realized that there wasn't a book at the time that taught phrasal verbs in context. So when you're teaching phrasal verbs, we normally teach it with the verb or the preposition. That's how we group it together. But we realized that, why not teach it through the units that you find in your course books? So yeah, we wrote this 5 years ago. It was with Prosperity Education. But yeah, I think it's actually a really useful resource. So you can use it alongside your textbook. So say you're teaching a unit on shopping, there's phrasal verbs in context with shopping and additional supplementary materials you can add in as well.
Brilliant.
And Pete Clements wrote an IELTS practice book as well through the same publisher. And that's a really useful resource because, again, it's sort of skills based as well, rather than just sort of looking at the IELTS and thinking how overwhelming it looks. It's sort of teaching time management skills and things like that.
Yeah, I reviewed that one. That was a really well written book, and it was a great shift away from your standard exam book to this, and it focused on a lot of learner training activities as well. Yeah, so shout out to Pete there. That was great. Actually, and I think his co-author, Phil, I forget the co-author's name. So you have to forgive me, but there is a co-author there as well. I'll put links to all of these in the blog post I do for the chat. But I'm also going to put links to OtterELT, so everyone can come and explore what all the goodness is about. Well, ladies, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you this morning. We've covered so much. I feel like we've been here, but it's gone like that. I mean, we've been taking for a bloody hour.
It's gone really fast.
It has, hasn't it?
We could chat all day.
I know.
We could.
It would be so nice.
Yeah. Well, ladies, thank you very much for your time. I hope you have a lovely day, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.